group of three. One group was the P10 that was launched by FDC and Kano Besidi. The other group was the NUP group, really the most amateurish group. I don't know why that group even wants to claim that they can tackle the state. In scouting language, you would still call them tenderfoot. Then you had the hardliners of the disgruntled members of Boda Boda 2010, whose boss, General Kale Kaihura, had been dethroned. So these three groups were now mobilizing for massive protests. I've told this story before, even public. Security forces monitored a telephone call between one person abroad, a European, and the NUP leader. Now, you all know that in the UN Charter, there is what they call Chapter 7. Chapter 7 allows the military, a foreign military, constituted by the UN, to invade a country. So the NUP leader asked this European advisor, how can we persuade the UN to invoke the responsibility to protect? And this European says, that's not easy, because it requires a high death toll. And he said, if you can mobilize people to come to the streets in thousands and thousands, and at least 500 people are killed, then the responsibility to protect may be invoked. Now, if you are in charge of the government and you are listening to that conversation, what would you do? Ministry of Justice. Maybe some people didn't want me to go back there, but I'm there. And you heard the president say, we are allies. Allies means you agree on more things than you disagree on. That's what being allies mean. Other people, especially my friends in DP, were saying, now that NRM and PLU have endorsed a candidate, please don't embarrass yourself by going up to the end. And I said, I'm ready to receive my vote to show that I believe in myself. I got 15. The president was complaining that those were his votes. And then he said, we need to talk about them. We shall definitely talk. So what's the problem in the opposition? The problem in the opposition is failure to adapt to the new power dynamics. I was joking in my office earlier that that's the problem of Brazil in football. They are playing 1970s and 1980s football in 2026. You see, you must keep adapting. I see some of you saying, if the Mao of 20 years ago met the Mao of today, they would fight. Obviously, they must fight, because the circumstances have changed. You mean if you brought Idi Amin to Uganda and you said this is Uganda, you would say, no, 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 this is not Uganda. Where is officers' mess? You say, no, 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 that's not, there's no officers' mess anymore. It's not there. So the shallowness of our so-called analysts just shocks me. You must keep adapting. You must keep adapting to the changing circumstances. So the music changes, you are still dancing the same way. Okay, it may be a good dance, but those who are looking at you will wonder whether you are deaf. So we kept telling our friends in the opposition, the time has come for us to engage President Museveni, whether behind the scenes, whether what, through iPod. Others were making it a point of pride. We will never be photographed with President Museveni. How? And then me, Mao, they said that I'm now part of the junta. But now, what strategy do you have? So don't think that this is just about the opposition. We must build a Uganda which is safe for all political parties. Because if a house catches fire, then there's no safe room. You cannot say, my room is safe. You pray for those whose rooms are burning. Eventually, the fire will catch you also. When I was a young man in parliament, there are those who used to mock us because of the war in northern Uganda. But did they know that $1.7 billion, which would have built schools and roads and health centers in the southern part of the country, was being used in the war in the north? So you are paying a price whether you believe it or not. It doesn't need a very big brain to understand that. It is costing you. So even the NRM needs a safe Uganda, which is safe for all political parties. The failure to adapt is what has mainly caused many of the disagreements. The other problem in the opposition is hypocrisy. Pretending. One time I came here and I said Dr. Besigye was in talks with President Museveni. First they denied it, then the data came out. So you are talking, you are fighting. What is what? Then we have iPod, which is a platform of political parties in parliament. Now we have NRM, NOP, FDC, UPC, we have ANT and PFF. PFF has 2 members of parliament, ANT has 1, and then DP and the FDC and so on. I'm pleased to announce to you that the spirit of dialogue is catching fire. I won't go into details, but I've been in healthy conversations with the leader of opposition, Honorable Joel Senyonyi, and the Secretary General of NUP, Lubongoya, Louis. And we have agreed that they must take up their seat in the iPod summit. So before this month ends, we are going to have an iPod summit. And I'm the chairman of that summit. I once stood here and I said, if it will require me to kneel in Kavule, I'm happy to go and kneel for the sake of Uganda. So the iPod Council has approved the procedures for NUP to join, and I believe ANT. I don't know about PFF, but dialogue is a healthy thing. If Iran and America that are bombing each other can talk, if Israel and Hamas that are daily sending missiles at each other can talk, then what is it in Uganda which can prevent us from talking? You remain who you are. But because I have seen that because of hypocrisy, many of our leaders in the so-called opposition want to pretend that if they are photographed with President Museveni, then they are sellouts. You must be very weak-minded. That standing near somebody transfers his ideas into your head automatically and displaces yours. So that brings me to some of these topics. I want to assure you that these topics will feature in the IPOD summit. The human rights situation in the country and the issues of corruption. Sometimes security agencies do things which they alone understand. But it is their duty to explain to others who are part of the state. You may have seen General Salim Saleh's note circulating on media. I never commented on it, though I was the subject. I don't know what you people read in that note, but it simply said that the Minister of Justice needs to be briefed. It has happened before. You remember 2020, when there was a wave of arrests before the elections. Some people did not understand. But eventually, when we sat with the president in one room, he made us understand. And by the way, there's a difference between understanding and agreeing. I will explain something to you, you'll say, I understand. You don't even have to agree. But at least you will have a view of what really happened. So many people were killed by police and the military in November 2020, you remember. And the Inspector General of Police Deputy was fired, General Sabit Museveni. You do remember that. Because the state did not look good. They overreacted, the force was excessive, so many people were killed. But that wasn't the end of those who wanted to continue with agitation. They now formed a group of 3. One group was the P10 that was launched by FDC and Kano Besigye. The other group was the NUP group, really the most amateurish group. I don't know why that group even wants to claim that they can tackle the state. In scouting language, you would still call them tenderfoot. Then you had the hardliners of the disgruntled members of Boda Boda 2010, whose boss, General Kale Kaihura, had been dethroned. So these 3 groups were now mobilizing for massive protests. I've told this story before, even publicly, based on a briefing by the president in an IPOD summit. Then the security forces monitored a telephone call between one person abroad, a European, and the NUP leader. Now you all know that in the UN Charter, there is what they call Chapter 7. Chapter 7 allows the military, a foreign military, constituted by the UN, to invade a country to protect civilians. It is called the responsibility to protect. And it has happened. Sometimes it is invoked. So the NUP leader asked this European advisor, how can we persuade the UN to invoke the responsibility to protect? And this European says that's not easy because it requires a high death toll. And he said, if you can mobilize people to come to the streets in thousands and thousands, and at least 500 people are killed, then the responsibility to protect may be invoked. Now, if you are in charge of the government and you are listening to that conversation, what would you do? wait for the mobilization to reach the streets, then you are provoked to open fire or disrupt it. Remember, General Okech had been appointed now to be Deputy Inspector General of Police, and he was in charge of that operation. And together with other agencies, they disrupted that plan. How? By arresting the ringleaders. It was unfortunate, but it was the second best thing, because the worst thing would have been a massacre. I have asked even our foreign friends, diplomats from Europe and elsewhere, I said, if you were in charge of your government and you are listening to a conversation between a political party leader in your country and a foreigner, what would you do? Tell me honestly, what would you do? Leadership demands that you must do something. And that's what they did. It is very unfortunate and regrettable that some people died in that operation. Other people were arrested and they were dumped in a remote police station because they were scattered all over. But it's the responsibility of the government to deal with whatever went wrong. When an operation goes wrong, the government has to own it. So the government still has to be engaged. If there's any citizen who has disappeared, if there's any citizen whose whereabouts are not known, it is the role of the government to respond to that as a problem. Because it is the government which is in charge. You cannot say, don't ask us, that's none of our business. It is our business as a government. So, now we have this situation of the arrests of people like the Lord Mayor. Unfortunately, in Uganda, those who know very little are the ones who talk the most. I know a lot, but I talk little, because some of the things I know, if I were to tell them, you would again say, you shouldn't have told us. We want to ask Ugandans to let due process take its course. As the Minister of Justice, my role is that of a linesman. You know a linesman? A linesman lifts the flag when the ball has crossed the line. I have raised the flag before, and today I want to raise that flag again and say, laws are not suggestions. Compliance with the law is mandatory. It doesn't matter who you are. All of us in public offices swear to defend and protect and uphold the Constitution. That is the same oath that all police officers, all members of the judiciary, all members of the UPDF, that is the oath they take. There is no need to use excessive force against someone who is not resisting arrest. Torture is expressly forbidden by our Constitution and even by a separate law passed by the Parliament. It is forbidden. So, as your linesman, my flag is up on the question of torture, on the question of excessive force in arrest, in the face of illegal detentions and unlawful arrests. But the one who responds to the linesman's flag is the referee. You know, the linesman doesn't have a whistle. Have you ever seen a linesman with a whistle? Now you people want to give me a whistle. What sort of game will we have? That means there will be 3 whistles, because you have one linesman on the other side, you have another linesman on the other side, and then they make the whistle by the referee. This country has a president, this country has a commander-in-chief. Like any referee, it is his duty to scan the field and see when a flag is up to respond to that flag, because we work together. It is as simple as that. And it doesn't require me to insult anybody's mother to get that point across. So I call upon all of us who are trying to build a better country to realize that ultimately we all need the law, by the way. Even those who abuse the law, we need the law. I believe some of you are students of literature. You may have read a book called A Man for All Seasons. In that book, there is a chancellor of England called Thomas More. Sir Thomas More was having an argument with a man who really loved to wield power. He was called Mr. Roper. So Mr. Roper says, if I'm chasing the devil, I'll cut through every law in England while pursuing the devil, because my objective is greater than any law. Then Sir Thomas More asked Mr. Roper, and if the devil turned on you, would you not need the law now to defend you against the devil? So we all need the law at one point or another. Even those who abuse the law. So let us not crack our heads over things which don't concern us. In this country, fortunately, we have elections every 5 years. That is actually the ultimate point of accountability. But if citizens go to vote because of 5,000 shilling, 10,000 shilling, then what do we do? What do I do as Minister of Justice? If a local mayor can corrupt you, if an MP can corrupt you, then you say, I'm not well represented. Now, who do you blame? The restoration of the vote is the most important revolution that we can talk about, to give force to the vote. So, I don't need to talk about corruption, because I know most of you are mainly concerned about the dramatics. But it has a history. I am the one who led the fight to transfer the file of Dr. Besigye from the court-martial to the civilian court. You remember, I was even chased away from Parliament. I went to Parliament and the Speaker said, don't come back unless you have a report that Colonel Besigye is appearing in a civilian court. But I actually have no power. I can't call a judge and direct a judge. Some of you think I can call a judge and say, please give bail to that one. Don't give bail. We will have messed up the system. The next time when Honorable Sarah Dong is in trouble, she'll say, oh, why don't you call the judge? We don't want to be like Mr. Trump, who calls FIFA and says, suspend the suspension. I think first we must understand the system. Now, let's get a few things straight. Who are the people that are in the news? First, we have the Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. I was out of the country. I don't know what really happened. Maybe somebody will tell me. He got bail, and I heard him announcing that he was resting. Then the next thing I heard, he was really breathing fire. Now, for those of us who like being in the struggle, we struggle for impact. You see, when you're an army, you don't do too many parades, because a parade does not kill the enemy. Okay, parade looks nice, you can display your marching skills and so on, but at the end of the day, you must also know that when the contact begins, it may not end well with you. I do not know what his current state is, but the right to apply for bail is a right open to all Ugandans. So with that history that I've given you, and the debate which took place in Parliament, and the decision of the court, which everybody celebrated, that civilians should not be tried in the court-martial. We are still struggling to transfer all the cases because the DPP's investigation team has to look at all those files afresh to prepare them. And that process is going on. I want people to know that the government is committed to complying with the decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. And the government also made those changes. That is why, for the first time, members of the court-martial were subjected to interviews by the Judicial Service Commission. It had never happened before. Lastly is the question of a fair trial. What is a fair trial? A fair trial must be speedy. That time when we were in Parliament, you remember I had a heated exchange with one of the people on the opposite bench who said, why is the government not transferring the files? And I said, by the way, as government, we lost the case. You know that government lost the case. We lost. So when you lose the case, it is the winner to go and extract the order from court so that it is executed. But if you have lawyers who spend more time politicking than fighting for you, you can have problems. But also, when you have decided that a case is political, then you should take the Mandela route and be totally unapologetic. Actually, that is the right route. Because Mandela stood and said, you have left me with no option but to plant bombs, to bring down the apartheid system, and I'm not here to apologize. He even said, you judges, you are the ones who should be here to be on trial. So what is going on in Uganda? I do believe that all those suspects who are before court are entitled to a speedy trial. And according to the law, they are now entitled to mandatory bail, unless there are other reasons for them to be kept. But those are not decisions of the minister. Because bail should actually be the smallest thing. I saw how people were celebrating the bail for Honorable Miriam Matembe, the bail for Timothy Kalyegira. That is now, I call it the low expectation syndrome in Uganda. The expectations of Ugandans have become so low that now you are supposed to be grateful when bad things are not done. You should be grateful when good things are done. If I'm carrying a stick, then you can come and say, thank you for not beating me, sir. But the stick is not for beating just anybody. I call upon Ugandans, let's continue insisting on the rule of law and constitutionalism. But we must also understand who is supposed to do what. I believe we shall have a detailed discussion in the IPOD summit. Now, as the chair of the Cabinet Standing Committee on Human Rights, We still expect to get a full briefing by the security chiefs, which includes the CDF, the Inspector General of Police, the Commissioner General of Prisons, the Director General of External Security Organization, and the Director General of Internal Security Organization. We believe the information they'll share with us as the Cabinet's Standing Committee on Human Rights will help us understand what is going on better. I don't like talking about things that I don't understand fully. So, for the record, the members of the Cabinet Standing Committee on Human Rights include myself as the chair, the Minister of Internal Affairs as the deputy chair, and the members are Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Local Government, Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development, the Attorney General, the Government Chief Whip, and ex-officio Secretary General of the NRM. Now I want to picture all those people in one room being briefed, because we must act as the whole of government. Now I understand the reason why people make the comments they make on social media. I want to assure you that we should let the system that is established work. In the same way that we were able to understand the 2020 unrests and the tragic happenings, I believe even this one we will get to know more. I'm not the judge, but I think all parties, the accused persons and the prosecution, should agree to move with the case forward. In any case, all decisions are even appealable. I believe that when I get more information, I'll be back to explain to you what really is happening in these cases. I also listened to the speech of the president when he addressed the nation, and he basically said the same thing I've said now. That the CDF's radical response to radicalism in the opposition. And the answer to that is for us not to be watching the game of the radicals. The answer is for us to focus on the real game that takes Uganda forward. And DP is in the best position to lead that. For those who have questions in English, I want to give you time now. Yes, please.
Thank you, my chairman. Edward, you talked about dynamics in power. And one of the things that we really are looking at was becoming more skilled. We are now seeing the amendments coming into Parliament on the administration, Parliament administration to change how the leader of opposition should be elected in Parliament. You lead a party that is opposition. What is your observation on how these amendments will still go to Parliament? And lastly, the former Speaker of Parliament, Anita Mo, has been confined to her house for more than a month now. And whereas there could be issues from the government for doing that, on the lens of human rights and those things that you're talking about, doesn't she deserve some kind of maybe even to be calculating that she's suffering, she has health issues, and also her accounts have been closed? I don't know whether you've heard about it. So,
I'll start with the first one very quickly. The Parliament has granted the request by the movers of the motion asking for authority or permission to present a bill. And they claim that the purpose of the bill is for the leader of the opposition to be elected by all members of parliament who are not NRM. That bill has ever been presented before and it was rejected. It was presented by our member actually in that case. Ironically, our member who was totally opposed to the cooperation agreement. But later we understood the circumstances under which he was arm-twisted to bring that bill. So, yesterday I spoke to the Deputy Attorney General. I asked him whether he had got any instructions to draft the bill. And he told me, yes, the Attorney General's chambers has got instruction to draft the bill, because our duty is to draft all bills. Because drafting a bill is not like just writing anything. It is a professional thing.